Welcome back. We're looking forward to continue in the 17th epistle, Yud Zayin, page Kuf Chaf Hey. On the opposite page would be 248, of course, this is in the original text. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're following, we're holding 4 lines from the bottom. The Alter Rebbe last week brought the pasuk, V'shamru derech Hashem la'aset tzedakah mishpat. You would guard the way of Hashem to do charitable acts, charity, and as the pasuk goes on, mishpat, judgment. But the Alter Rebbe says chulu because, of course, he's underscoring the idea of tzedakah. Well, Alter Rebbe is trying to glean from this that this is the derech Hashem. Tzedakah is the way of Hashem. Hashem doesn't have any other ways. Every mitzvah is about the past, nesivei seho, the paths and the ways about Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's what a mitzvah is. And to be direct, it's the connection of a yid to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via that mitzvah. Derech Amud Zeh, like the Alter Rebbe has it, the expression in also in Igeres HaKodesh a bit later, which is towards the end, the final, towards the end, and the famous Eishes Chayil, Igeres HaKodesh, every mitzvah is an Amud through which a yid connects to on high, in the very deep level of the on high. So every mitzvah is a derech, the way to Hashem, and from Hashem to the yid who is mekayim the mitzvah, fulfilling the mitzvah, that deep interaction. So why would tzedakah, more than any other mitzvah, be called derech Hashem? And the Eibishter himself, it's a pasuk in Torah, b'shamru derech Hashem la'aset tzedakah mishpat. Why would be tzedakah? Why tzedakah more than any other mitzvah would be called derech Hashem? So this is what began last week. We quoted the pasuk, and we mentioned that in the end of the day, tzedakah is the mitzvah of Kodesh Baruch Hu. Every moment of Kodesh Baruch Hu vitalizes, vivifies all elements. And when we speak about this which we're a bit more familiar with, which is Eilam Haza, every moment Hashem is giving tzedakah. He's vitalizing every detail, as Lashon is in Medrash, in our Memari Chazal, and the sayings of our sages of blessed memory, this expression that every every blade of grass, when you look at that blade of grass, it just didn't come to be based on the dynamics of the way Eilam Haza unfolds. You plant, you sow, it grows. Yes, that's true. Also the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But right now, the blade of grass is receiving an energy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why not only it's growing, that's why it exists. HaKadosh Baruch Hu would pull back on that tzedakah, on that giving, on that flow of energy, and that providing the energy. The blade of grass would literally disappear. It wouldn't decay. It wouldn't fall apart. It would just literally disappear. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mahave, Mechayim, Mekayim. It constantly brings existence and life to every detail in creation. And as we mentioned before, the last week, that is, a number of times, especially when we learn Shariach Memuna, where the Alter Rebbe speaks about the doimim. You look at that stone and you look like kan nimtza kan hoya. It's always there from the 6 days of creation. So at the time, 6 days of creation, I know prior to that it wasn't there, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought it into existence. So I see somewhat the tzedakah, the flow of energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which brought about the whole area, the whole world that is of daimim, of the inanimate, including that stone. Okay, that I understand, but the stone is there from the 6 days of creation, and that's where it is. No one budged that stone, especially when you see a stone, someone on top of a mountain or so. Yeah, why would anybody want to move it? Especially a large stone. It was created in the 6 days of creation, and that's where it is. Comes the Alter Rebbe says, no, every moment HaKadosh Baruch Hu is providing the energy even to the daimim, into the inanimate, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would take away, would stop providing, stop giving the tzedakah, if you will, again in this context or in this learning over here, to that stone, the stone which again not only just fall apart, but it would totally disappear. So when you see it exists, is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving chayis, life and energy every single second, and beyond that, every millisecond, constantly providing energy to that stone to make it exist and then to keep it alive or to keep it in its image, in its form. And Alter Rebbe elaborates on this in the very beginning of Shar Yichud B'Emunah. We mentioned many times that, additional to the Alter Rebbe himself cross-referencing throughout the entire Tanya to other places In Tanya, we do so periodically ourselves, simply where it's more elaborated on. Instead of taking the additional time to elaborate, we just send you to the place where we learned, of course, the this which we already have crossed, this we have already studied together. It is, we crossed, but with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the entire Likutei Amorim and Shaykh Bemuno and Igeres HaTshuva. We're holding on the 17th of this segment, Igeres HaKodesh. We did mention, and we periodically do, that Igeres HaKodesh is indeed a distinct type of segment. It's not similar to the previous. You have a full presentation and the backdrop of the entire Igeres HaKodesh. And again, we do mention this almost every class because, of course, mainly for the newcomers, but instead of taking the time to point this out, we had a presentation at the beginning of Yud, at the beginning of the 10th epistle. So there's just a few back. And we can understand it on the onset also. This detail, how it's distinct, the Igeres HaKodesh, every letter is written separately, addressing a separate idea he wanted to convey based on this which needed assistance or needed chizuk, needed strength, and so on. Every letter that, again, we did note also, the Alter Rebbe even sometimes, infrequently, but mentioned in one letter about what I wrote you at another time. And that letter happens to be in Igeres HaKodesh. The Alter Rebbe wrote many, many letters, but these 32 made it in, again, not only by overall Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, it was with precision, by the Bnei HaGoyin HaMechaber, by the Alter Rebbe's children. Each one was a giant on its own, and they unanimously decided that these 32 are going to enter and become part of Sefer Tanya Kadisha, which every letter of the Alter Rebbe is Kodesh, is holy, of course. Iger is Kodesh, something that entered and became part of Sefer Tanya Kadisha, is probably Kodesh Kodashim. I would say that term in every working of the Alter Rebbe, even this which did not enter into Tanya. But of course, it's additional, many folds over in its kedusha, and it's part of the becoming part of the Sefer Tanya Kadisha. At the end of the day, it has 5 segments. We mentioned this also. It's also with precision. This is notably the Sefer Teresh Biksav of Teres Achsidus. So there we had a full presentation of the backdrop of Igeres HaTshuva, of the Igeres HaKodesh, that is. The easy way to access it, again, wherever you're watching, but there's always an advantage of the original website. Tanya Online, one word.com, tanyaonline.com, and the advantage, namely, it has all the previous classes set up on the left side of the screen. Additional advantage, the way this text is on the scroll on the site with a separate scroll bar, easier, makes it easier to follow the class. As we mention all the time and again, wherever you're learning Tanya, this is the you can see all these subjects everywhere, and wherever Tanya is presented, you can always see and study these ideas in detail, where they're discussed more. But again, I refer to the original website over here. In our study is just set up in a way that is just easy to access all the previous classes from the very beginning of Likutei Amorim, and as we mentioned, also the way it's set up with the easy to follow the text as we study along. So in last week's class, the Alter Rebbe quoted the pasuk earlier of David HaMelech saying, "Rechava mitzvahs chama'id." Your mitzvah is very broad, and apparently the Alter Rebbe says every mitzvah had this broadness because every mitzvah has this deeper dimension of energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is manifest through the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Again, you see this in the entire Likutei Amorim. I wouldn't even be able to send you to one page. This is, the crux of the message of the Likutei Amorim, mainly from the very beginning of Yud Ches all the way to Chof Hey, and later the Alter Rebbe starts celebrating mitzvah, Torah mitzvahs, and Perek Mem Hey, Mem Vov, Mem Zayin, and Mem Vov through to the end of Tanya, basically. Mitzvahs are the tachlis harachvus, the ultimate of broadness. It's the save of kolalmim energy vis-a-vis the memala kolalmim energy. Again, you got to see the explanation there. And this is the spirit of the Alter Rebbe's message, throughout the entire Tanya. The virtue of Torah mitzvahs is a different level. It's tachlis harachvus, is the ultimate broadness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's extension, context of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's extension, exposure to the Yid who's Mekayim the mitzvah, fulfills the mitzvah, or learns Torah. So why did David HaMelech say this mitzvahscha as opposed to mitzvahsecha, which would be plural, which would include all the mitzvahs, and he says it mitzvahscha, which is singular? And we know that everything David HaMelech said, every word David HaMelech said, it wasn't just, okay, mitzvahscha, it's mitzvahsecha. No, mitzvahscha. He was referring to the mitzvah of tzedakah. True, every mitzvah has that rachvos, but mitzvah scha, the mitzvah of tzedakah, has the ultimate rachvos, even an edge over every other mitzvah, because this is the derech Hashem. This is Hashem's mitzvah. And the Rebbe is bringing this pasuk in the context of the keren, the principle of tzedakah, as he brought the Mishnah. We spoke about this 2 classes ago, if you will. This is the 3rd class on Yud Zayin. There is the schar, the profit of the mitzvah, and there is the principle of the mitzvah. The profit of the mitzvah, these are the one of the mitzvahs the person benefits in this very physical world, in Bona Chayim, whatever man, Alei Adoma, is a neshama invested in body and in Bahamis. This is the natural desires. We're not talking about desires directly associated with the nefesh bahamis, the animalistic, the bodily desires. It's just a healthy person when he lives in Elam Haza. A bracha for him that it's easier. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes it easier to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to serve Hashem. That he has long life and he has no achings and no pains and he's healthy and his children are healthy physically and emotionally and psychologically. There's a smoothness for the yid to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with simcha v'tov levav, with joy and gladness of heart. And what about parnasa? Yeah, that's part of the package. A person has broadness of parnasa. There's less worry, there's less preoccupation, so he can continue to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with that uplifting spirit. Does a yid have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Even chas v'sholem, there is a compromise in those areas. Of course he does, but a bracha for a yid, when a yid asks a bracha for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he asks it in these very areas, with the chief, the principal areas, to which makes a yid more comfortable, as a human being more comfortable to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again the ultimate purpose why we came into Elam Hazeh, to serve Anini v'reisi l'shamish eskaini. So as a human being, this is the package. Bona chayim zayna revicha, a lot of parnasa that Rebbe used to say, revicha in all, not only in mezayna, but good gezunt and good healthy children and success with children. And we know the difference between revicha or just something which is mediocre or even good, but revicha in all that I've mentioned many times over the mezayna revicha, which is usually generically understood. Mezayna, we see mezayna is parnasa berebach, but the revicha in all, that's the schar in Elam Hazeh, that's the profit. But the keren, the principle, remains intact. That's what's so unique about these mitzvahs. In this, which is presented in that Mishnah, we should take in consideration, even when one wants to be selfish, look at those mitzvahs and excel and do them carefully, because Hashem promises in these mitzvahs that these mitzvahs, the profit is going to be, you'll be able to reap the profit in this very physical world, and the principle will remain intact. So the Alter Rebbe picks up on Vakeren, as we began last week. Vakeren, you want to understand the Keren? This is the mitzvah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The principle, which is where it really is on high, the true virtue of the mitzvah on high, which is the principle of the mitzvah, because this is Hashem's mitzvah. Because this is what Hashem constantly, by default, does constantly. As Allah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He constantly does that to vitalize all the worlds, and He will do so in the future with greater strength and greater intensity. And He's referring to the future when Mashiach will come. It'll be such an overpour of Hashem's broadness, the rachmas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the extent that it will be felt so emphatically in Elam Hazeh. And Alter Rebbe, as we're going to learn today, Alter Rebbe is talking about the great promise of Tchias HaMesim, that the resurrection of the dead, meaning to say those who passed away thousands of years ago, will revive and resurrect and they'll live in Elam Hazeh. That's the full-blown manifestation which anybody could ever dream of or think of, or the furthest imagination, that this which a body which passed away, which ceased thousands of years ago, would come to life. That's a yeser se'es Hashem v'yasel asid, is going to do more even, and with greater strength and greater intensity by far. So the truth of the matter is, every mitzvah we do would draw the save of Kalal and energy, which this idea of Tchis HaMitzvah could only happen, namely, but because the save of Kalal, Gashmis and Ruchnis, like it's explained in many, many Maimorim, the physical and the spiritual is equal in the face of the Ein Sof, vis-a-vis the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So from that level, Gashmis, Ruchnis is, of course, something which was a Davar Gashmi, and many of these bodies have mostly decayed, and nonetheless HaKadosh Baruch Hu can revive them, and they appear in the same image as they were thousands of years ago. This only comes from the enormous rachvus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what Alter Rebbe says, and Alter Rebbe, of course, tells us why Hashem will do it, and why is it worth it for all those tzaddikim which are sitting and basking in Gan Eden, and what levels of Gan Eden, the highest levels of Gan Eden. Gan Eden HaTachtin, Gan Eden HaElyon, and there's so many levels within Gan Eden itself, Yelchu Mechayil L'Choyil, and particularly the great tzaddikim, Moshe Rabbeinu, thousands of years in Gan Eden. We can't even understand even what Gan Eden HaTachtin is all about. It's mentioned many times, Alter Rebbe in Shir HaShirim gives a little bit of a glimpse what the energy of Gan Eden is all about. This is even Gan Eden HaTachtin. We have no understanding. We cannot wrap our minds, or even halfway or a quarter way, or begin to wrap our mind for real to understand and appreciate what happens and what's transpired. The great Tainug of Eden Shamas, which Yeshvim V'nenim B'ziv HaShechina, which derive pleasure and delight from the Ziv HaShechina, even at the level of Gan Eden HaTachtin. And even a level of a righteous Jew which deserved and is receiving his rewards in these levels of Gan Eden. How much more so the great tzaddikim, which Yelchu Mechayil L'Choyil, they're in Gan Eden HaElyon, and in Gan Eden HaElyon, they're constantly elevating themselves higher and higher and higher. To what degree? There is no degree, because you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ain't like Sof, it doesn't have an end. So it's indescribable, even in words, to say what Moshe Rabbeinu, the domain where Moshe Rabbeinu is, as an example. And yet, Moshe Rabbeinu, all Tanaim and all Amiroim, and again, Amiroim, Tanaim, Moshe Rabbeinu, the others, they're all coming back down into Elam Haza. By Tchias HaMesim, we have to understand what for. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's full expression, a full manifestation of the true Rachmas of the Ein Sof? Why is it going to be in Elam Haza? Why in this physical world? But one thing we see clear, we think about Tchias HaMesim, the most elemental level we understand, and we can appreciate what that writes. Hashem will do rather with greater strength, with greater intensity. This rachvos, this broadness, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu connects precisely with Elam Haza, and extends to and connects with precisely Elam Haza. And this is that's why the pasuk, V'shamru derech Hashem, which is basically what we're holding, the derech Hashem. This is the way of Hashem. Of course, every mitzvah connects the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if you want to say iconically, what is the derech Hashem? That's the tzedakah. And therefore Hashem tells the Yid, V'shamru, or by Avraham Avinu, I believe this pasuk is said, that they would guard the derech Hashem, last tzedakah mishpat, that he gives over to his children. I believe this pasuk again said by Avraham Avinu that when he speaks about tzedakah, that not he just says V'shamru tzedakah, that they will guard the mitzvah. No, derech Hashem, last tzedakah mishpat. This is iconically the derech Hashem, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu constantly does. He constantly provides. Every day, every hour, every minute, every moment, every millisecond, and probably beyond. He's constantly giving stuff, constantly providing. When Mashiach will come, will come the time of Tchis HaMesim, we'll see him even more in a greater dimension. Again, as is Lashon of Alter Rebbe, with greater strength and greater intensity and greater strength. Alter Rebbe is in the text over here. This is basically the idea bichlolus, which what the Alter Rebbe is conveying. So Alter Rebbe goes on, and again 4 lines from the bottom. When we say derech, a way, is usually mentioned when one needs to go from one city to the other. So there's again drachim, drachel, darchinim. Then there's nesiba. He says more path. A path is more a minuscule type of connection. Let's say a field to another field would be more a pathway or similar. But when you say derech, a way, like we say a highway, a little more acquainted to us, it's when you want to go from one city to another city. So t'kachat tzedakah, so too charity. When you say charity in the face of in context rather of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's charity. That's the revelation and the expression and the light and the shine of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, which is known to be Seviv Kalam, the transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we explain this so many places, starting from Perek Gimel Likutei Amarim. It's a click away, the first segment. And we mentioned this last week as well. The phenomenon of Seviv Kalam in a different type of dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is for Himself, by Himself, encompasses all elements. All elements are equal in the area and the light, in the face rather of Seviv Kol Almin. Atzilus, which we spoke about Atzilus so many times, a holy world, a divine world, a world of houses the Ein Sof. But in the face of the Seviv Kol Almin, it's not only the Asiya and Atzilus one way or another. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to focus on Asiya similar to Atzilus because it's the Seviv Kol Almin, it's a transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, Atzilus and Asiya is exactly the same. Could you think about Asiya, especially when you're talking about Elam Haza Gashmi? This Elam Asiya is the same as Atzilus in the face of the Ein Sof. Yes, in the face of Ein Sof, true infinity is it's not excited of something which is similar, has the vibes of, in this case of Elokus, more than Elam Asiyah Gashmi, the very physical world. Because if it does, it's not truly Ein Sof. As we mentioned last week, again, it's a click away. I'm not going to take the time again. Last week's class, these classes are set up that the latter ones are on the higher part of the screen, as you can see. So the second class on Yud Zayin pointed out this idea, which the Alter Rebbe has in Perek Mem Ches in Likutei Amarim. It's worth to see it there. 48 in Likutei Amarim, the first segment, also a click away, of the whole idea of Seviv Kol Almin. If the infinite basically is excited over a billion or trillion or quintillion over a million, or even 1,000, or even 100, even one, so it's not truly infinite. In the face of infinity, a trillion and one is exactly the same, because if it's not really truly infinite. Again, you can see it there. It doesn't say exactly these words, but this is the message. And we mentioned this briefly, at least in the last week's class, but enough to understand when you're talking about Seviv Kol Almin, it's the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The way it's Hashem is Seviv Kol Almin, He transcends all Almin to the extent that all elements are equal. You could imagine the intensity of that. That's the revelation of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, Sheyoir Kol V'Yizgala De'Elam Haza, which is again is the Seviv Kol Almin, that He will shine and will reveal till this very physical world. And again, because in the face of Seviv Kol Almin, Atzilus and Elam Asiyah is exactly the same. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be manifested, the level of Seviv Kol Almin will be manifest and shine and be revealed, it will make an impact in this physical world in ways that are, again, as we mentioned, indescribable, unimaginable. I say unimaginable because everybody knows Tchias HaMesim. A Yid grows up with this promise, knowing that this Tchias HaMesim will occur. It will unfold. But when we think about it in detail, it's just the most difficult subject that a human mind could ever not only wrap itself around completely, but even begin to start trying to wrap itself around this phenomenon of Tchias HaMesim. As we mentioned before, even bodies which passed away, deceased thousands of years ago. How is that even possible? But could you say in the face of Seviv Kol Almin that something is not possible? He's able to do that. He's able to be manifest in Elam Atzilus and not manifest in Elam Asiyah. So that's not real Seviv Kol Almin. If it's Seviv Kol Almin, it's a transcendent Eid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, when that is revealed, the Izgala De'Elam Haza, that is going to immediately establish and begin the process of the execution of Tchias HaMesim. So Alter Rebbe said, "Bisarusa l'sato." Of course, everything is dependent on the arousal of below. As Alter Rebbe began this page, Noida the bisarusa l'sato causes l'susa leila. That Alter Rebbe is specific. What does it mean l'susa l'sato? The arousal of below, that a person arouses, quote, arouses in his heart the attribute of kindness and compassion on all those who are in need of compassion. because HaKadosh Baruch Hu establishes his whole relationship with Am Yisrael, in particular, the entire world in general, and the mankind in Bepratius, and more specifically when it comes to Am Yisrael, with this whole establishment of reciprocity. It's not only a one-way giving, it's a two-way road, but it's beyond that. It's a relationship HaKadosh Baruch Hu has. In every relationship, there is a constant flow. The arousal of below causes the arousal of on high. We give tzedakah, which is again another impetus to the yid to constantly give tzedakah, because tzedakah is the derech Hashem. And that's why David HaMelech says on Davka mitzvah tzedakah, rechova mitzvahs chomei. This is your mitzvah. So the more we give tzedakah, the more we enter into the Seviv Kalamin area. We're able to extract the Seviv Kalamin area, extract the deepest parts of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, that the Kodesh Baruch Hu Yoir V'Yizgala will shine and be revealed and be totally manifest. So the Alter Rebbe says, of course, B'Sirus L'Sata, but stated tzedakah b'Chesed Chinam. In the end of the day, such a great revelation is still tzedakah b'Chesed Chinam, and this is somewhat, one way or another, commensurate to what the Yid gives, because categorically it's his money. Even though, as David HaMelech says, that every money a person receives, Mishulcha Nosanu Loch, as David HaMelech looked through the lens of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, what I give, I'm taking your money and giving it back to you, and I provide for the poor, because why did you give me extra money more than the other party? Am I deserve it more extra money? Of course not, necessarily. And you gave it to me that I should be able to be your ambassador, your shliach, in order, your messenger, in order to provide for the poor, which is in need. As Alter Rebbe writes, the poor, this individual needs compassion. They need food on their table and lodging, whatever they need. In today's the way things are established today, similar to the way it was in the past. There's a whole package of the needs of a human being, alei adamis, in this world, and many people are lacking many of them and many of the basic staples of life. And Hashem gave me the extra in order to give it to the other party. Says David HaMelech, then Chatchila, he looked at that extra money, what Hashem gave him, Mishulcha, it's yours, and I'm giving it back to you. Granted. But in the end of the day, categorically, it's my money, paper, even according to Torah, it's my money. And I am extending it to another party. So there is a certain chesed chinam, there's a tzedakah. That's why it's classified as tzedakah. I'm doing a charitable act. Belong to the other party categorically, so it's his or hers. I'm not doing charity. It's like picking up a package which says this and this name and giving it to this person. So it's not a charitable act. Maybe it's an effort. If I found it, b'shavas aveda. Any way you look at it, but it's not. You can't call it tzedakah because it belongs to the other party in the onset. Money which categorically belongs to me, and true, I have to introduce this the way Torah looks at tzedakah. The way through the lens of Torah, the way David HaMelech said it so clearly and so emphatically and so poignantly, it's not yours to begin with. HaKadosh Baruch Hu entrusted you to give to to provide to the poor. The famous story of an individual, in the Alter Rebbe's times, he succeeded in particular days. He right away said it to him. It was like a miniature type of prophecy. The Alter Rebbe's Shadar is coming, and sure, he showed up within hours or in a day, because he felt that he had extra success. Why did he have extra success that particular day? Because the Alter Rebbe needed money for his pu'ulas, for his tzedakah projects. And those were the shadar. Shadar means shlucha derachamanu. They were called the messengers who came to collect the money. These used to travel different towns and cities in order to collect the money for these important projects. So he had a successful week, a successful few days. He said, the Alter Rebbe Shadar is on his way. And sure enough, he showed up. Religiously, it always worked out that way, because he knew, why did they wish to give him more money? Because Alter Rebbe Shadar is coming. That's why Hashem gave me more money that time. And again, it's an honest lens, which is predicated on this statement of David HaMelech, Mishulcha Nosanu Loch. Perspective. Hashem I'm giving you I'm giving yours back to you when I'm giving to the poor. But again, that's the way a Yid has to build himself up in order to see properly through the lens of Torah, which again, this was David HaMelech's message. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kaim, as a leader of Am Yisrael, tried that we should incorporate this appreciation of the mitzvah tzedakah, that when you have extra, it's not And Etzem Hashem gave it to you to be the good messenger, the emissary, in order to provide for those who are in need, the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which are in need. Many of them, they're basic staples in life, and you help them, you provide them. And of course, by extension, a meisid, an organization which is in need, in order to do the important holy work which the organization presents. It's chinuch al taras hakodesh, education, Jewish education, and so on and so forth. So they're lacking. Hashem gave you extra in order to be His ambassador, in order to be able to extend its tzedakah to the other party. But categorically, it's still called tzedakah according to Torah, because on paper it's mine. I earned it, I worked for it, and in the end of the day, it's categorically belongs to me, and therefore when I extend it to another party or to a meisid, it's tzedakah, it's chesed chinam, it's kindness. So when a yid does that, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu will reciprocate. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reciprocates. Says David HaMelech, Rechava mitzvahs chama'id. This is the mitzvah of tzedakah. This is your mitzvah, which you constantly do. And when I will do more and more tzedakah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're going to respond and reciprocate in your rachvos. What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rachvos? True rachvos. It's the manifestation of Seviv Kol Almin. This is the most transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which will shine and will be revealed, and it'll be manifest in this very physical world. The Mashiach will come with Chis HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, as we mentioned earlier. Infinitely greater than all the levels of Gan Eden. And Al Rebbe says this briefly: Gan Eden Elyon and Gan Eden Tachtin, which we know there's many, to no end for that matter, levels in Gan Eden. Even in Gan Eden Tachtin, namely Gan Eden Elyon, like it says in many places, many places, the many levels. And again, the non-end of levels exist in Gan Eden Tachtin, namely Gan Eden Elyon. There's no stop and said that Hashem says, Moshe Rabbeinu, you had enough of the ha'ara of the tainug in Shams Yeshiv and enemies of Ashkenan. No, Yelchem B'chayil Choyil. To what degree? Well, we talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so there is no end. But yet in the same, and therefore these tzaddikim are constantly going, especially there are special days of the year where the tzaddik has that extra bonus to go to a higher level when it comes to a day. But yard site is an example. So the tzaddikim are going mechayil choyil, basking in a deeper level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, this is areas which we have no understanding, but there's a pleasure, there's an enormous delight. A little bit we could have, I could say, a spark, maybe even less than a spark. So at times there's a successful davening. For the matter, we mentioned the famous expression of a chassid. He says, if you'll have a successful davening, you'll never want to engage in any other pleasurable connection with Elam Haza, because of the great pleasure, the deep and such profound delight which exists in a successful davening. And it's truly so. The chassid said it because he was someone who really knew how to exercise a healthy davening. Davening is, of course, not an external idea, a shuckle, a scream. It's supposed to be a very deep, emotional, sensational, and intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the time of davening. So a little bit, sometimes a little spark, we get a person has a tainug, namely pnimis hatayra. There's a real delight, but again, a spark of a spark, perhaps of a spark of the tainug of the neshama in Gan Eden, Gan Eden Tachtin, Gan Eden Elyon, Yelchem B'chayil Choyil. But whatever points out, in the end of the day, this is all part of the memale kol almin dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we spoke about this again so many times, the difference of the two, starting from the third chapter, L'kuti Ambarim, it's a click away, and other places. But memale kol almin is the dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu where he fills, as you hear the words, memale kol almin, he fills all the elements. So if he fills this element, this world, this physical world is run the way it is, the sun shining and the moon coming, and the moon and the heavenly army and the trees and the grass and the whole system of Elam Haza is established by design by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which fills. HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides the energy to the apple, therefore it tastes like the apple, it looks like the apple, has the color of the apple, the character of the apple, if you will. And then there's another energy which provides for the orange, and that's why the orange tastes like the orange, it looks like the orange, and so on and so forth. because Hashem is memale, all the Eilumis. This is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is invested in Eilumis. Now, this is in this physical world. In Eilam Haba, in Gan Eden, there's another deeper extension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, deeper expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which allow the neshamas, which they don't need apples and oranges or anything. They don't appreciate anything of which is beneficial and maybe even pleasurable in this world. Not at all. It means nothing to them, because this is all a bodily need associated with an animalistic desire, particularly the nefesh bahamis, together with the body, have certain needs and pleasures associated with Elam Hazah, to the neshama, which is divested of the body at that time after, when it leaves the body, it has literally no interest. It's totally insignificant for the neshama. What does the neshama appreciate? A delight of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, something which is going to bring its pleasure and its delight, which is again the neshama is a chelik kamimal, which is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So any godly, a dosage of godly, additional godly energy, that brings appreciation and brings excitement and brings pleasure and delight to the neshama. And these are the many different levels of Gan Eden, which each level is another dosage of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the cross from Gan Eden Natach and Gan Eden El is explained in the Maimorim. In Chassidus, there's many Maimorim that Rabbi Shaba explains so carefully the transition from Gan Eden Natach and Gan Eden El, known as Nahar Dinor. It's all worth it for the neshama because it enters deeper and deeper into that sensation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the Gan Eden Ha'elyon is which is a different phenomenon at the onset, but then there's also so many different levels, Mechayil L'Choil, and without any end, and each one is another expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but again, part of the package, if you will, of Memale Kol Almin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu filling in every Eilam, based perfectly commensurate to how much the Eilam could contain, Eilam could take it, how much the Eilam could contain, how much every level within that Eilam, as we know, there's Heicholes and Partsufim, again, not to go into it now. In every single element, everything is measured perfectly based on the keli, on the container, how much air could be exposed to that container. And then there's the higher level, more refined Eilam, and a more refined Eilam, a more refined level within the Eden. That, as a result, is cause and effect, or together, working together, the air is commensurate to the keli. And based on the higher level of Gan Eden, there's more light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the neshama to have even greater time, even greater pleasure, becoming deeply connected, even more profoundly connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yet, this is all the Memala Kalam dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like an example we gave. Yeah, someone makes $1,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million, and then a billionaire. This is the human being down here in this world, any human being, even somebody who's a pious yid and pleasure, the default pleasures of Elam Hazard doesn't particularly excite him that much, at least. But $1 billion, yeah, you could build so many meisters and you could provide so much charity. A human being appreciates $1 billion on every level. What about $1 trillion? And what about beyond that? It's extremely exciting. Could you compare 1 trillion to 1 billion? Could you compare 1 billion to just 1 million? Just, again, of course, in context. Could you compare 1 million to 50,000? There's no comparison. In the end, there is a comparison because the whole million is made of 1 million ones. Pull out a one, categorically, it's not a million anymore. As we explained the phenomenon of Seviv Kol Almin last week and a bit this week. But in the overall, you can't compare. This is and not only can't compare, sometimes it's a quantum leap difference. 1 million to 1 billion, 1 billion to 1 trillion, or 1 trillion to 100. Great differences. But this is all in areas of Memale Kol Almin. Similarly, in these Eilumis, this is the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the establishment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not to be Malaklam, that he fills every single world commensurate to the level of the world, to the air which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to provide to that Eilam. In order that air should be a stronger air, and so on and so forth. But could you compare that to the idea, as again an example of infinity, as we mentioned, and then in Pei Gimel, explained it then the first time Dr. Rebbe mentions Memala Kalam and Seviv Kalam. And again last week, at least succinctly pointed this detail out, that in the face of infinity, 1 in 1 trillion are exactly the same, because the moment infinity is somewhat excited about a trillion over once. It's not truly infinite. Now, could we understand, even by saying these words, that in the face of infinity, a trillion and one is exactly the same? Could we a bit appreciate what infinity is all about? It's hard too, because we're finite human beings, but somewhat we get a little sense that this is a total different idea. And so too when it comes to Sovev Kolalmin, in comparison to Memale Kolalmin, Memale Kolalmin is enormous. He's ultimately right. This is Ganei the Ha'ore, the Gilui, the revelation of the Ha'ore, Ganei Natachtin Ha'elyon. It's stupendous. We don't even have an understanding what the first level Ganei Natachtin is all about. The lower level Ganei. And there are many, many levels within Ganei Natachtin. How much more so Ganei Ha'elyon. And these greater levels, higher and higher, where these great tzaddikim were basking for thousands of years. We have no understanding in this. But in the end of the day, it's like an example, the average person, $1 trillion in my bank account, or one is struggling to pay his bills and all of a sudden $1 trillion, it's stupendous. But it's still $1 trillion and not $1 trillion and one. We're not talking about what it makes, if it makes a difference. If a person has $1 trillion or $1 trillion and one, it's the point that there's limitation there in the end of the day. Infinity is a different idea completely. Sovev Kolalmin in comparison to Memale Kolalmin, it's like it's a no starter for Memale, for the highest levels of Memale, because that's what infinity is. That's what Sovev Kolalmin is. Sovev, it transcends all elements, and that area, Ganei Natachtin, Ganei Ha'elyon, Elam Haza, it's exactly the same. We could just have a bit of appreciation. You're talking about a total different idea, and that is going to be manifest in this very physical world. The ultimate expression of Hashem's stoko, and the true rachmas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, rechava mitzvascha, your stoko is going to be broader and yet broader, and Mashiach will come. You're going to have the ultimate, the rachmas, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's going to be manifest in this very physical world. Yes, there will be the resurrection of the dead. Those who see the seas will be revived and be resurrected. And all those neshamas are going to come marching down. As the Alter Rebbe will conclude over here. The Alter Rebbe says, and how do we know it? That it's a greater ayr. So we know it by the definition of the ayr. This is Sovev Kolalmin, and this is Memale Kolalmin. But where we see evidently this idea that this is a total different idea, that Jarei Kol Neshamas HaTzadikim Ba'atanoim, Ba'anevim, Shem At B'Gadnei Ha'elyon, B'Reim HaMailis, Yislab Shebeguf V'Seim La'asid, that all the neshamas of the tzaddikim, the holy, the most righteous people in all of history, and the tanoim, and the prophets, which are now in Ganei Ha'elyon, let us give stachna, of course, they're already in Ganei Ha'elyon. And what level is Ganei Ha'elyon? The highest of heights in Ganei Ha'elyon. They will invest in their corporeal bodies. When Mashiach will come, and they will be resurrected. In the time of resurrection, to benefit from the ray of the Shechina. And again, this is in context that they will benefit from the level of Sovev Kolalmin, because Memale Kolalmin, as Alter Rebbe is going to go on, will begin again from these words that whatever they're benefiting from presently is still part of the Memale Kolalmin package, if you will, expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mashiach will come, the time of Tchis HaMesim, it'll be a new window of the ultimate rachmas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Sovev Kolalmin, which is going to be manifest in Elam Haza. Even again with this unimaginable occurrence of Tchis HaMesim. And again, when you think about Sovev, is it difficult for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When you think about Memale HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, it's commensurate to an ayr, and everything is to the keli, to the container, and there's certain things you can't say. Nothing's really kosher, really difficult for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even from a malakal, from the ayr, or the dimension of Memale Kolalmin. We're still talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that is the way Memale Kolalmin is set up by design, by Hashem Himself. And there, from the perspective of Memale Kolalmin, not necessarily Tchis HaMesim would unfold. That those are deceased hundreds and thousands of years ago will resurrect, become full people, and they would. And why would the neshama again want to come down to this world? to this mess. Then it won't be a mess, of course. Then you'll have the full manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in mind in the very beginning of creation. This is where Hashem's real interest was. Dafka Ne'elam Haz. Like Dal Tereba writes famously in Perik Lamed Vav, worthwhile to see in the Likutei Amorim, the first segment Lamed Vav, but even Atzilus, right? These levels of Gan Eden we mentioned so many times. This is the Yitzira Elam HaYitzira, and Gan Eden Elam HaBriya. Atzilus is a different idea. There's a question that is in Neshamis, as in Malachim in Atzilus. Neshama comes from Atzilus. But Yeshua and Nenim, we spoke many times, that cannot be because of the enormous energy which exists in Atzilus. So Gan Eden, even Gan Eden Elyon, saying this briefly, Gan Eden Elyon is still in Elam Mabriya. Atzilus is a different idea completely. It's still in Elam. But Dal Tereba writes there in Atzilus is Hayil V'lahem Yerida Me'epon Bizbarach. Atzilus is a Yerida for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because where's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's interest is Dafka Elam Hazeh. And because of this, the Neshamas are going to come dafka down to this place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he says has his main interest, that's where he has his main expression, his main shine, his main manifestation of, again, the way he's for himself, by himself, Seviv Kol Almin, dafka in Elam Hazeh. So besides the miraculous dimension of the Tchias HaMesim, which is, again, unimaginable, in a human mind can never begin to understand and appreciate this idea. How is it possible? But you're talking about Sevakal, yeah, that's exactly the way it's going to unfold. But namely, what's behind it, that the Neshamas will want to come down Dafka and Elam Hazeh, because here there's the Tachlis, HaKabona, this is the ultimate intent, and this goal it's all intertwined. This is the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to open up his inner window, again, the Eirein Sof Dafka Elam Hazeh, because when we say that's where his interest is, so that's where, just like when someone has an interest in a particular place, that's where his mind, his thought, his pleasure, his core of himself is right there, and that's what is going to be manifest when Mashiach will come and will reach the ultimate stage within the Messianic era, which is Tchias HaMesim, because of Kodesh Baruch Hu. Then there will be the full manifestation of the inner dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, the Seviv Kalam dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which would make it all worth it, again, by definition, that these Neshamas and Tzadikim, of the Tzadikim, Tanoim, and Evim, which are now the highest of heights, in Gan Eden HaElyon, will come down and invest in bodies, corporal bodies, in Elam Hazeh Gashmi, this physical world, because then, Dafka, in Elam Hazeh Gashmi, there will be the total manifestation of the true Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Seviv Kalam dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the ultimate staka, which is the real derech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the staka, the real staka of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ultimate, rather, rachmas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the reason why David HaMelech says on the mitzvah tzedakah, Rechava mitzvascha, tzedakah is your mitzvah, which you constantly provide. And Baruch Hu will express the tzedakah with greater intensity and greater strength, loving, namely by Tchias HaMesim, when you have the full manifestation of the dimension of Seviv Kalamim, yes, in this very physical world.